Diomede here, Telemann Braun, speaking with Patrick Chalmers. One of the founding members of Telemann Braun has moved on to a bigger project called All Hands On, which is a series of documentaries about democracy. I'll let Patrick fill us in on the intricacies of the project. Patrick, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Joe, and thanks for the introduction. Obviously, you never leave Telemann Braun, so this will always be the place of my heart. The point about All Hands On is it's a short documentary series, and it's about the crisis in global democracy, but not just the crisis, also some really hopeful innovations that are taking place around the world to try and sort it out. And it centers on this idea of current democracy is of elections, but original democracy was random selection, so lotteries and deliberation. That's what the Greeks meant by democracy. And so that's what the series is all about.
Excellent. And you have already shot the first movie of the series, and that was in Ireland, I believe. And the name of that was, I forget, I'm sorry. What was the name of that film?
So the name was When Citizens Assemble. And that was all about last year, 2017, the Irish Citizens Assembly, specifically focused on the question of abortion law in Ireland. And the citizens, the participants, there are 100 of them in that assembly. They spent 5 weekends looking at abortion law in Ireland, looking about what happens elsewhere around the world, listening to experts, listening to both sides of the debate, listening to the testimonies of women who'd been to England and elsewhere to get abortions. And then they came out with a set of recommendations, and they're going to be put to a referendum in Ireland this year in 2018.
Right. So your film basically is documenting the actual procedure of real, what you feel is real democracy in work. You're not concerned with numbers or how to vote, or it's changing the whole idea of what we have grown up to think of what democracy is. Am I correct in that assumption?
You're exactly right, Joe. For about 200 years, since your great American people took the word democracy and you stuck it onto elections. The ancient Greeks, the ancient Athenians, they saw elections as oligarchic, which means power in the hands of a few, or aristocratic, which is power in the hands or rule by the best born, a narrow elite. But the Greeks, originally when they meant democracy, they meant random selection and deliberation. And that's exactly what this film series will look at in different places around the world, Ireland being the first example.
Right. Can you just random selection? For me, I might be lost. It's a little lost on me. So can you explain to our audience random selection, what that means in deeper?
Yeah, of course. It's a great question, Joe. If you think of criminal juries, anyone who is a citizen of a country in the UK and the US, not every country in the world, but there are countries that use criminal juries. Anyone can be randomly selected and go on jury duty. Why is it such an interesting thing? If you're randomly selected from the whole population, you will get lawyers, yes, doctors, yes, nurses, yes, but, the unemployed, single mothers, all variety of ethnic set up in the country. So you'll get a random selection of the population. It will represent the population truly, as opposed to elections. If you look at, I come from the UK, if you look at elections, they tend to be extremely well educated, by conventional means. They tend to be very rich, they tend to be white, they tend to be male. So that's not representative of the UK, for example. So random selection means that you get a representative sample of your country. You then bring them together and they deliberate, which means they meet people they wouldn't necessarily meet. They talk about stuff, so like abortion for the Irish, and then they come to conclusions. And they often move. That was the evidence of the Irish film, is that people, when they go through that process, they have their set of views coming in and they change by virtue of having deliberated with their fellow citizens.
Right. Okay. So democracy at work, and I guess we get rid of, like you say, a corporate elite interest, because now you could be anybody. It doesn't have to be Donald Trump, who happened to be a billionaire and could afford the process of quote unquote what America calls democracy. So how does that work? Does everyone get fair play? And how do you get put into office then? When you say random selection, no election, what does it mean now? Who becomes president, prime minister, or does that not happen in real democracy?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and you've got to be realistic about this. We're not jumping from the current system to suddenly everything being randomly selected like that overnight. So the concept of random selection, as we're going to see in the film series, is being applied at all sorts of different levels. For example, the Irish, they chose it for one question. So it wasn't a question of replacing elections with random selection. It's a citizens' jury on one subject. And there are academics who've put together some really very plausible plans for how you could use random selection, a whole series of different bodies, in order to move towards a system which didn't have elections. So it's a progressive process. It's a gradual process. You can't just do it overnight. But the advantage is, as this gathers steam, is that you remove a lot of the conflict from politics. If I'm in an election and I'm against you, I have to say, Joe's rubbish, vote for me. And you have to say, Patrick's rubbish, vote for me. And also, if I have more money, I can get my face out there much more than you can, or vice versa. So if I don't have my own money, like Donald Trump, he had a lot of his own money, then you have to get it from someone else. And if you get the money, you then have to, do things for it. And that is the problem of elections. The people who spend the most are most likely to get voted into office. And once they're in office, they then can make more money. And so you have this cycle of money, power, money, power, money, power. And random selection and deliberation is a way of getting past that, getting away from it, and improving transparency, removing elections and all the conflict that comes around that.
And not even money, power. I guess another subtext of that is owing favors.
Yeah, favors, money, often they ultimately amount to the same thing.
Right. Okay. So all hands on. Sounds like an excellent project, and hopefully, years from now, we'll say, I remember when that movement started, when we had random selection. This is excellent. That's Patrick Chalmers, All Hands On, the small series right now that is online, and you can catch the first film. Where's that?
It's on my Vimeo account or YouTube. If you tap in When Citizens Assemble, my name, Patrick Chalmers, you'll get it. I don't have the URL in my head, but you'll find it. Figure it out.
Okay, very good. And we can follow his series online, and there'll be more movies to come. Thank you very much, Patrick, for that interesting talk on democracy. Joe Diomede, Telemann Brunn, saying thank you.